and welcome back to the channel once again people. My name is Sadiq. Well, most of the time people complain that my images are not sharp, they are blurry. Well, shutter speed is not the only reason why an image is blur or it is not very sharp. There are many reasons to it. Subscribe to the video because this video is going to be very interesting. You're going to learn something very different and something new which you have probably not actually thought about. Today we are going to talk about a subject called focal plane. No, I don't mean that you're going to focus on this plane like a focal on a plane, focal plane. But this is a very technical thing, but a very simple thing in photography. If you know this, going forward, your pictures are not going to be blurry or unsharp. Now, when you take a shot from a camera, the autofocus locks the focus on the subject that it sees right in front. Now, let's do one thing. Let's add another subject here and place it a bit behind. Notice the subject behind isn't sharp because the camera has locked the focus on the subject which is in the front now. Now let's reverse this. We'll focus on the subject which is behind. Here we go. And the subject which is in front is now blurred. Now you must be wondering what the hell is happening here. You know, there's so much of confusion. Hold on, I'll explain because this is very important to understand. Now let's keep both of the subjects in the same line and we'll see that both of the subjects are now in focus. Now let's look at the diagram that I'm showing you using a PPT slide. This is a top angle, this is object A and this is object B. Now when the camera locked is focused on object A, apparently the object B behind it got defocused, probably got blurred because the camera is focusing at a particular point which it can only focus at one point at one time in a scene where two objects are placed one behind the other, right? Now when we get both of these objects in the same line, they are both in focus because they are both now in the same focal plane next to each other. This imaginary line is called as the focal plane. Now, what is the whole point of explaining this particular concept today? Now, let's talk about wedding photography. That is a classic example. Many photographers who are into wedding photography, they discuss with me, they talk with me that, sir, that where the bride and the bridegroom, the couple are standing, that line we focus on for apparent reason, we got to keep them in focus. The line behind or the row behind or the row in front is most of the time it got blurred because they are not in the same focal plane. We have three rows. In the center we have the bridegroom, behind we have other guests, in front we have more people because there are no stage, they want to cover a lot of people at one time. So this is the problem many wedding photographers face. Now what is the solution for this? The solution is simple. You got to increase your aperture. If you're shooting at f4, definitely that is not the right setting when you're shooting wedding photography and you're covering the traditional style. Traditional style means that on the stage we have the couple and people are visiting them on the stage. People stand behind and people also stand in front, creating 3 rows at a time or maybe even 2 rows. So in that case, aperture comes very handy. You got to increase your aperture from f4 to f5.3, 6.1, at times even 8, above 8, because if there are too many people, then you need to get them in focus. Now you will tell me that since we are going to increase the aperture, light is going to go down because the narrower the aperture, the lesser the light comes in. Correct. For that you will need either you will use a porta light with a good lights which you keep steady, with a continuous light which gives a good amount of light. If not, you see many of the wedding photographers are using flash because flash compensates for the light which is lost due to the narrow aperture. So I hope this concept is now clear that how important is focal plane in photography. So is it really important to always use the focal plane rule? No, not really. In fact, that's not really possible to do all the time. In fact, food photographers use that to the advantage. Now, if I'm shooting a lemon mojito, I'll keep the main subject with the chilled mojito and ice cubes, everything in the glass. That will be my main subject. I'm going to focus on that. In the foreground, I'll keep some chopped mint leaves. In the background, I'll keep some slices of fresh lemons. And I'm going to use an aperture of f1.8 to create a nice depth of field, making the whole scene look aesthetically very pleasing. Now we all like to use prime lenses because they offer fantastic depth of field, sharpness. You all know a prime lens, how it works. These days you have prime lenses which are as a wide opening as having a wide opening of 1.4, 1.8, and so on and so forth. You got to keep in mind that when you're shooting with an aperture of 1.4, 1.8, and even if you're shooting a single subject, maybe you're shooting a bride, you focus on the eyes, you'll notice that the ears are going to go blur because the focal length at 1.8, it is again very shallow. The eyes may be in focus, but the ears are definitely going to go out of focus because the distance may look small from eye to ear, but when it comes to focal plane, that wide aperture opening is going to give you that really amazing depth of field. And that may also work against you because if the subject says, hey, why are my ears not in focus? That can be a problem. Let me show you an image of my daughter when she was around 2 years old. I shot it using a 50mm 1.8 lens. Look at the eyes, tack sharp, but the ears have got slightly out of focus. When we are shooting landscape, of course, we want everything to come into focus, the foreground, the midground, and the background. That's why we use an aperture of f8, f11, f13, f16, depending upon the scene that we are shooting. So I really hope this video is giving you a clarity of how focal plane works. As much as technical it may sound, but it's a very simple term. If you keep this in mind, your images will never go out of focus or you will not get blurry images. Subscribe to the channel. Bye.